Hello, and welcome to today's topic, the elements of graphic design for beginners. Let's start off with talking about the definition of graphic design. What is graphic design? It's the art or skill of combining text and pictures in advertisements, magazines, books, posters, or websites. It's kind of a basic definition. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that. For the purposes of this class, though, we're going to get into the basics. We're going to be designing some really amazing work, and in order to do that, we have to follow the same rules that all graphic design artists follow. They're called the principles of design, and they appear in every well-designed piece of work you see out there. All of these elements are connected. They don't stand alone, which you'll soon see. These elements are called contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Some of these words might sound familiar, maybe not. Let's get into them. The first topic is contrast. And contrast is created when you place two different or opposite elements together. The more different, the better. As we see on the screen right now, we have a dark background with white writing. It makes the writing pop out because the background is so dark. If the background was a little bit lighter, we might have a harder time to read the words. Contrast creates an exciting graphic element to your page. Contrast also allows important things to pop out at the reader. So if there's some specific title or element that you want everyone to see, especially in an advertisement, you want to use contrast. You can create contrast with font size, font style, and colors. As we can see on the screen right now, the title contrast is using contrast to pop out so we know that this is the topic. Let's look at some other examples. Here is an advertisement. Pretty simple. Tap water is, on average, 500 times cheaper than bottled water. Boycott the bottle. But if you were just to glance at this for 1 second, the first thing your eye goes to is boycott the bottle at the very bottom. They're using contrast in color to make our eye go to the most important point they're trying to make in this advertisement. In this second example, this is the cover of a magazine. They are using a couple elements here to create contrast. The first thing, the title, is big. It's the biggest font on the screen, so that creates contrast. And the color red, different than the other colors that we see in the writing. So it's bigger. It's also using a different font and a bright color contrasted with a light color. So it really pops out. This is one example of contrast. The next topic we're going to look at is repetition, to repeat. So we see repetition in all sorts of advertisements, design work that we see all over the place. So repetition basically means to do it again, to repeat. And this principle states that you should repeat some aspect of the design throughout the entire project, because we don't want everything to be different. It can be a little bit of overload, so we want to make sure that there's some element that keeps repeating. The use of repetition makes the entire project look connected from the first page to the last page. You can use repetition in your fonts. So basically, just like we see on the screen, I'm using the same font type. If we're using the same bullet point style, as you can see on this screen, colors, the alignment that we're using, or any graphic style can be repeated. And let's look at a couple examples. Here is the cover of a magazine called Pilebook. The first example of repetition that I can see here is the color yellow. They've repeated the color yellow in 3 different areas. The second example of repetition in this is a second color, the background color. And even though the top color band is a little bit darker than the bottom, but they're still in the same area. This is another example of repetition. And finally, let's look at the fonts. They're repeating fonts as well. And in fact, I see on this screen a few different areas where the fonts repeat other than the ones that I've pointed out here. Now, looking at a different example, can you point out repetition in this flyer? Looking at fonts, colors, alignments, lots of examples of repetition here. The next principle we will look at is alignment. And this one's pretty basic. Alignment is the placement of text and or graphics so they line up on the page. We use alignment to create order, to organize things on a page, to group items, and to create visual connections. Right now, with my list here, 4 bullet points, because they are aligned together and grouped together, we look at that and visually know that they are connected. If I had each one of these bullet points on random areas of the screen, we might not get that they are connected. Also, alignment, good alignment, is always invisible. We don't even notice it's there. But when things are out of alignment, we definitely notice. Let's look at an example of different types of alignment. Here is an icon from an average word processing program like Word or Pages. And let's take a look at what this different types of alignment do. Left alignment, here's an example of left alignment. So we have an edge on the left side of the text. Center alignment, hello summer in the middle there. Right alignment, this list of fonts. And justify, and that's the one a lot of people don't know. Justify is when both sides of the text are lined up like this. The last principle of design we'll look at is proximity, also known as closeness. It's a way to organize ideas. Proximity is defined as the state of one object being near another. In design, proximity creates a connection between grouped elements on a page. Visually group elements, which could be text and or images, group these elements that are connected. If elements are not connected, they should not be in close proximity to each other. That can be very confusing for the audience. Let's take a look at this example. Here's a flyer for a concert. Lots of information here, kind of busy, but they did utilize the principle of design, proximity. Number one, we have all of the band names grouped together in one area. And on the other side, we have all the concert information grouped together. So it's easy for the eye to scan around this page and find the information that they're looking for without it getting too messy. And in this example, this is a screenshot from a website. This design is actually pretty basic, right? We've got black background, red, and white. So it's kind of easy to get lost here. But because they utilize proximity, things are well grouped. So in one area, we find out what they're up to. Down at the bottom in the middle, they're telling us what's next, how to get in touch, and a little bit about how they work. So using proximity allows us to organize ideas so our viewers don't get lost in the mix. Our last topic is color. Color in design. The first thing we need to talk about and look at is the color wheel. You guys have probably seen this before. It's a great way to find some different interesting colors. The color wheel is used to make good decisions about what colors you might want to choose for a project, utilized by graphic design artists all over the world. How do we use the color wheel? Well, there's two basic elements of color theory. The first one is called complementary colors. Complementary colors are found on opposite ends of the color wheel. So let's take a look at some kind of popular complementary colors. Blue and orange found on opposite ends of the color wheel. And when you look at these color combinations, think about how you've seen them used in popular culture. Maybe logos for famous companies, restaurants, or sports teams. Here's yellow and purple. Red and green, another very popular set of complementary colors. Why do we use complementary colors? What's the big deal here? Complementary colors are often used together to create excitement using contrast. And remember contrast, putting two things that are very different together to make things pop out. So each color in a pair, as we see here, makes the other one stand out more, become more vibrant. So if I were to use, let's say for example, red writing on a green background, that writing's really going to pop out. Complementary colors can be used to create a feeling of excitement, something dynamic, to create contrast. So here we have our color wheel. Finding a complementary color is pretty easy. Just go from one end to the other, find some colors that work together. And in a real life example, here we see complementary colors at work. Red writing with green writing, and that red writing really pops out because it's put next to that green writing. Again, contrast using complementary colors. Another color combination that's pretty popular is the use of analogous colors. Big word, analogous colors, sometimes also known as harmonious colors. And analogous colors are those that sit next to each other on the color wheel. So here's our color wheel. Anything that's next to the other will usually look pretty good. So here's an example of analogous colors being used. Red, orange, yellow all work pretty well. I want you to think about how you've seen analogous colors used in popular culture. Again, think about logos. Lots of analogous colors out there. And here's another example of analogous colors used in design. They work very well, also known as harmonious, and you can see why. They do create some element of harmony. Now that we've taken a look at the different principles of design, let's test your understanding by bringing it all together. Let's look at this website called Fit for Kids and look at the design elements. First off, do you see an example of proximity in this website? Remember, proximity tells us that things that are close together are connected. Do you see different things grouped together on this page that might be connected? Next up, do you see an example of repetition, things repeating themselves? Repetition connects the entire project through repeated fonts, through repeated alignments, colors, and even graphic styles like the illustrations that you see. What about an example of alignment? What kind of alignments do you see being used on this page? I see center alignment and left alignment. Anything else? How about an example of contrast? And remember, contrast allows important things to pop out when you place two things that are very different next to each other. We can create contrast through font styles, through font sizes, through color combinations, and even graphic elements. Finally, let's take a look at color. Do you see the use of analogous colors, sometimes called harmonious? They're next to each other on the color wheel. How about the use of complementary colors? Remember, complementary colors are on the opposite sides of the color wheel. They create contrast. I definitely see something up in that navigation bar. Blue background, red writing. Definitely complementary. Well, I'm very excited to see what you guys will be creating now that you've been armed with this new knowledge of the different principles of design. Thank you for watching.